Residential sales comparison and income approaches, page 214. Of the sales comparison and income approaches, most residential appraisers will find the content of this section relevant in the majority of their assignments. Many, if not most, residential appraisal assignments will be for the lender to use in facilitating a mortgage transaction to construct, purchase, or refinance a property. And very often, these assignments will have assignment conditions in the form of regulations, guidelines, and/or client requirements that are expected to be observed by the appraiser. As stated in earlier chapters, USPAP requires the appraiser to recognize and comply with assignment conditions present in an appraisal assignment. Lending regulations and guidelines, as well as particular client requirements, may be directed to the development or reporting of an appraisal. The purpose of this section is to provide an overview of some of these requirements. It is not intended to be all inclusive. In some cases, special courses have been designed to specifically address most of these topics, such as specific reporting forms, FHA and VA appraisal, appraising for Fannie Mae, etc. As this chapter focuses specifically on appraisal development using the sales comparison and income approaches for specific residential lending situations, the discussion of special assignment conditions will be concentrated on that function of the appraisal process. However, reporting forms that are most often used in residential appraisals for lending transactions will be illustrated as appropriate. A full range of applicable Fannie Mae residential appraisal forms can be found in the appendix of this text. Observing Fannie Mae requirements and guidelines. Fannie Mae provides specific regulations and guidelines for appraisal development and reporting in Fannie Mae's Selling Guide. Many of these regulations and guidelines are related directly to the sales comparison approach and the income approach. Other secondary market participants, such as Freddie Mac and FHA, often mirror Fannie Mae in most of their requirements. In some cases, other lenders, such as a primary market or portfolio lenders, impose assignment conditions that require appraisers to observe guidelines, such as Fannie Mae's for mortgage lending appraisals. If a lender adopts Fannie Mae's requirements and guidelines into their standards, the appraisal will be done in a manner that will allow the lender the option of selling the loan to Fannie Mae at a later date. The ethics rule requires that when any of these assignment conditions are an element of an assignment, the appraiser must observe them. The competency rule requires the appraiser to, page 215, recognize the special requirements, know what they are, and how to apply them in an assignment. For our discussion here, Fannie Mae general requirements and guidelines specific to the sales comparison approach and the income approach, as addressed in the Fannie Mae Selling Guide, will be discussed separately. When the intended use of the appraisal is to assist with a mortgage finance transaction, the appraiser must be especially aware of any assignment conditions that may affect the analysis and development in the assignment. Fannie Mae regulations and guidelines are often used as a benchmark by other lending entities. For our discussion here, Fannie Mae general requirements and guidelines specific to the sales comparison approach and the income approach as addressed in the Fannie Mae Selling Guide will be discussed separately. Sales comparison approach. Fannie Mae considers the sales comparison approach to be the most reliable valuation method of the three approaches to value. The following is intended as an overview of some of the most important requirements and guidelines from the Fannie Mae Selling Guide in developing the sales comparison approach. We will discuss special handling of the requirements and guidelines and how these particular elements differ from traditional appraisal practices. Excerpts and paraphrase content from the Selling Guide are noted in italics. In general, the appraiser must, at a minimum, 1. Perform a complete visual inspection of the interior and exterior areas of the subject property, except for exterior-only appraisals. 2. Inspect the neighborhood. 3. Inspect the comparable sales from at least the street. 4. Research, verify, and analyze data from reliable, public, and/or private sources. 5. Report the analysis, opinions, and conclusions in the appraisal report. USPAP does not specifically address property inspection, other than being one of the options the appraiser may use to properly identify the property. In most assignments, the appraiser includes an inspection within the scope of work. One major difference specific to Fannie Mae from what the appraiser might typically do is the requirement to inspect from the exterior or to drive by the comparable properties used in the sales comparison analysis, or data that is used as transaction or rental data for the income approach. Following are some excerpts regarding this requirement from the Selling Guide. Although it is preferable for the appraiser to provide comparables from the subject's neighborhood, Fannie Mae allows for the use of comparable sales that are located in competing neighborhoods, as these may simply be the best comparables available and the most appropriate for the appraiser's analysis. If this situation arises, the appraiser must not expand the neighborhood boundaries just to encompass the comparables selected. The appraiser must page 216. Indicate the comparables are from a competing neighborhood and address any differences that exist. The Selling Guide states that when a property is located in an area in which there is a shortage of truly comparable sales, either because of the nature of the property improvements or the relatively low number of sales transactions in the neighborhood, the appraiser may need to use as comparable sales properties that are not truly comparable to the subject property or properties that are located in competing neighborhoods. If the appraiser utilizes comparable sales outside of the subject's neighborhood when closer comparable sales appear to be available, Fannie Mae has added a requirement that the appraiser provide an explanation as to why he or she used the specific comparable sales in the appraisal report. This will add transparency to the appraiser's selection of comparable sales and may assist the lender in underwriting the appraisal. USPAP requires that the appraiser analyze only such comparable data as is available. The Fannie Mae requirement offers guidance on how the data is classified and any limitations, necessary commentary, or disclosures required when the data is from outside the subject's defined neighborhood. When the appraiser is provided with comparable sales data by a party that has a financial interest in either the sale or financing of the subject property, Fannie Mae requires the appraiser to verify the data with a party that does not have a financial interest in the subject transaction. Again, the requirement is more specific than the appraiser's obligations according to USPAP. If in the analysis and completion of the sales comparison approach, the appraiser determines that the time adjustments are required, the adjustments may be either positive or negative. The adjustments, however, must reflect the difference in market conditions between the date of sale and the comparable and the effective date of appraisal for the subject property. Although the application of a market condition, time adjustments, either quantitatively or qualitatively, is an element of necessary practice when applicable in any appraisal. Fannie Mae is quite specific that adjustments are expected and how they should be considered. Notice that according to Fannie Mae, the appraiser deems when and if a market condition adjustment is warranted. In compliance with Fannie Mae, a minimum of 3 closed comparable sales must be analyzed and reported. Additional comparable sales, land contract purchase data, pending sales, and active listings may be used beyond the first 3 comparables as support for the value opinion. Page 217. Fannie Mae allows the prior sale of the subject property to be used as a comparable sale for additional support, but not as one of the first 3 closed sale transactions. Comparable sales should be closed within the last 12 months. Older sales can be used if the appraiser believes they are appropriate for the situation and the best indicator of value. The appraiser must explain the reasons for using any comparable sale more than 6 months old. It is generally accepted as good practice that the more data the appraiser analyzes and the more recent the data is, the more credible the results will be. However, USPAP does not reference the number of comparable sales the appraiser must analyze in the sales comparison approach or limit how old comparable data can be. As can be seen, Fannie Mae has requirements that extend beyond the minimum requirements established by USPAP regarding those issues. Fannie Mae requires using quantitative adjustments for any differences between the subject property and the comparable sales. The adjustments must be based on supported market reaction to the difference and not personal opinion. Qualitative analysis is not permitted. Fannie Mae has no specific guideline for an individual adjustment, although if one adjustment is excessive, the appraiser should comment on why it was necessary. Fannie Mae has guidelines for absolute, net, and gross adjustments. Large adjustments to comparable sales could indicate that the comparables may be lacking reliability as an indication of the subject property's value. In Chapter 3, it was illustrated how an appraiser looks at absolute, net, and gross adjustments as a technique of determining comparability of a sale to the subject property. Fannie Mae has guidelines that net adjustments should not exceed 15% and gross adjustments should not exceed 25%. However, underwriters use this established guideline as a general indicator of whether the comparable sale should be used or not. Net adjustments exceeding 15% and gross adjustments exceeding 25% require comment as to why the excessive adjustment was necessary and the relevance of the comparable sale to the subject. Quantitative and qualitative adjustments have been discussed in previous chapters. USPAP does not specifically address how a difference between the comparable property and the subject property is handled in terms of an adjustment. Fannie Mae requires that at least 3 comparable sales, preferably closed within the past 12 months, be used in the sales comparison analysis.